As I'm hearing it, Ortiz could fight Wilder, which is a great fight. If he does, we'd like to fight the winner. Those are the words of Eddie Hearn, talking about a potential showdown between his guy, Anthony Joshua, and the winner of Luis Ortiz versus Deontay Wilder if that fight goes ahead. Now, I'm also going to quote a couple of other people here. I'm going to quote Jose Sulaiman, who is the president of the WBC. He says, "We will do whatever is possible and necessary to make it happen. That's the fight everybody wants to see. Joshua is a tremendous attraction and a positive role model, and Wilder is the same." All right, so those are the words of Jose Sulaiman. Sorry, he goes on to say, he speaks a little bit more here. He says, "Two undefeated champions should meet in the ring as soon as possible. Both have commitments to finish, so next year is the time to meet." All right, so you've heard from Jose Sulaiman and from Anthony Joshua's promoter, Eddie Hearn. Joshua Wilder is, at least at this point, the most lucrative unification fight that could be made. And if Wilder manages to get past Luis Ortiz, and I hope to God, if Wilder gets past Luis Ortiz and does so legitimately, that people for once actually give Deontay Wilder some credit. Because the amount of criticism that Wilder gets, some of it is fair, a lot of it is unfair in my view, a lot of it is over the top, a lot of it is very dismissive of the good things that Wilder can do and has done. If he gets past Luis Ortiz, will he actually get some credit from the majority of boxing fans, or will they just say, "Oh, Luis Ortiz was an old man, this, that, and the other"? Will it be some revisionist business like that? Anyway, the point I'm making is, if he gets past Ortiz, it will boost his market value and his credibility as a champion to a certain extent, and it will definitely make a Joshua Wilder fight the most lucrative unification that can be made in the heavyweight division right now. Joseph Parker still has a way to go in terms of building his profile. So, and obviously, Joshua's got to get past his next opponent, whether it's going to be Kubrat Pulev or whoever it's going to be. He's got to get past that. Wilder's got to get past Ortiz. If they can set it up and make Joshua versus Wilder, two young guys. I know, Wilder's like 31 now, but he's still relatively young for a heavyweight. Certainly young of spirit. Two young guys, two big guys, two guys that are in shape. I mean, that's just going to be a marketing person's dream, isn't it? The television networks are going to have a bonanza putting that together. It would most likely be in the UK, I would guess, unless Vegas are willing to pay some crazy money to put it on over there. I would guess it would probably be in the UK, It would do a hell of a lot of pay-per-view, in the UK definitely. In the United States, if Wilder beats Luis Ortiz, especially if it's a good fight and he wins in spectacular fashion, would his public profile have been raised enough to make him versus Joshua pay-per-view in the States too? Not sure. I guess we'll wait and find out. But obviously, the majority of us want to see unification in the heavyweight division because, as Dwyer, for example, has pointed out many times, you got a bunch of champions and top contenders in the heavyweight division who are all unbeaten. Joshua, unbeaten. Parker, unbeaten. Wilder, unbeaten. Even again, some of the top contenders, Jarrell Miller, unbeaten. Hughie Fury, unbeaten. Tyson Fury, who I guess is kind of in boxing exile at the moment, he's unbeaten. How can we have all these young, unbeaten guys? They need to start fighting each other. And they will. They will. Rome wasn't built in a day. And I remember back in it, some people say I talk about the 90s too much. Maybe I do. But the 90s was one of the golden eras of heavyweight boxing. And I'm too young to have witnessed the golden era in the 70s. So the golden era of heavyweight boxing that I lived through was in the 90s. And I know all about it. So I do talk about the 90s a lot. And in the 90s, the big fights that everybody wanted to see didn't happen straight away. We had to wait a long time before we saw Lennox Lewis versus Evander Holyfield. We had to wait a long time before we saw Lewis Tyson. We had to wait a long time even before we saw Holyfield Tyson. They were supposed to fight long, long before they actually did fight in 96. They were supposed to fight sometime in the early 90s, like 90 or 91 they were supposed to fight. So, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Have some patience. The big fights will happen. The talent is there. This is a new golden age of the heavyweight division. I've been saying this for time. People doubted it in the beginning, but I know what I'm looking at. This is a new golden age of the heavyweight division. And you're always going to get people. When a new golden age is unfolding before our eyes, you're always going to get people saying, oh, it's not as good as the old days. These guys are not as good as the old fighters. When Muhammad Ali came along, again, I wasn't around then, but from what I'm told by people who were around, Ali was widely ridiculed by a lot of boxing people at the time. They said, this guy's not a serious champion. He's a loudmouth. He's like a circus act. This guy's not serious. You know, this is how Ali was viewed by a lot of people. And it took a while for Ali to establish himself as someone serious in the boxing game. They didn't appreciate him when he first came onto the scene. They tried to dismiss him and say, oh, we need somebody like Joe Louis again. Not just in terms of his outside the ring persona, but in terms of his inside the ring performances. Because Ali was a guy who used to clown around in the ring a lot. He wasn't always down to business. He used to talk to his opponents and do all kinds of stuff. Joe Louis was a guy who would get straight in and start, you know, breaking ribs and busting jaws. That's what Joe Louis used to do. Ali wasn't like that. He used to like to mess around in a lot of his fights. So people didn't really take him as seriously as they took a Joe Louis in the early stages of Ali's championship reign. And it's the same now. You know, it was the same in the 90s. People weren't taking Lennox Lewis seriously for the majority of his reign. It's only really after Lewis beat Holyfield and after he knocked out Michael Grant that he finally, after many, many years at championship level, started to be taken seriously by the boxing press, especially in America. They'd never really taken him seriously. They'd rubbished him all the time. And he had to go wipe out all the American fighters before they eventually started giving him some credit. And really, it was begrudgingly at that. It wasn't until the American fighters themselves were giving Lewis praise that the boxing writers in America finally said, okay, fine, he's not bad. You know, I remember when Lewis fought Ray Mercer, and that was a very tough fight, a very close fight, could have gone either way. After the fight, Ray Mercer was like, you know what? I got to give Lewis respect. He was a lot tougher than I thought he was. I was trying to hit him and get him the way Oliver McCall got him, but wow, he was, you know, I thought this guy didn't really have the heart to fight. But, you know, we fought on the inside like warriors, and I got to take my hat off to him. I'm paraphrasing what Mercer said, but that's basically the gist of it. He was surprised by how tough and tenacious Lewis was. And he gave him respect after the fight. When Michael Grant got wiped out by Lewis, Grant was the top American contender at the time. Lewis had beaten Holyfield, so on and so forth. The American press particularly were putting their hopes in Michael Grant and bringing the title back to the United States. After Grant got wiped out, he was like, you know what? You got to give Lewis respect. You know, he's better than you guys give him credit for. And so on it went. Evander Holyfield, similar kind of thing. Certainly years after he fought Lewis, it was a similar kind of thing, that actually Lewis is a really good fighter. You know? So, again, fighters are often not appreciated until towards the end of their careers, sometimes not until after they're retired. And it's not just fighters, it's also eras. Sometimes a whole era in boxing is not really appreciated until it's over and done with. That was certainly the case with the 90s, because all we ever heard throughout the 90s from the boxing pundits was how terrible the heavyweight division is. And actually, we were living through a golden age. We had one of the classic heavyweight trilogies of all time in the 90s, the Holyfield-Bowe trilogy. We had loads of classic fights and great fights. You know, and in this era that we're living through now, with the likes of Joshua and Wilder and Ortiz, and you still got Hay and Povetkin hanging around, you got Joseph Parker, you got Huey Fury, Tyson Fury might come back, you got Jarrell Miller, you got Dylan White, you got Chisora still hanging. listen, you've got a melting pot full of talented fighters here. And whether you think they stack up in terms of historically talented compared to some of the greats of the past is not really relevant to me. What is relevant, because we don't know for sure how they would have done against the greats of the past. We can only speculate. You know, we can't know for certain. We can have our beliefs, but we can't know for certain. But the reason why I say this is a golden age is because you've got a bunch of fighters who are exciting, and you've got a bunch of fighters who are on a similar level to each other. These are the ingredients that you need to make a golden age. Fighters who are exciting and fighters who are at a similar level to each other. During the Klitschko era, you had Wladimir and Vitaly who were not particularly exciting, and there was nobody around who was even close to their level. So that's why the Klitschko era was not exciting, because they were just far, far better than everybody that was around during their era, and they were not particularly exciting. You know, Mike Tyson was a lot better than everybody that was around in his era when he was in his, in prime in the mid to late 80s. He didn't have a lot of great competition, but Tyson was exciting. You know, he was actually exciting. So even though that wasn't a classic era, the Tyson era, it was at least fairly entertaining to watch, because Tyson would dispatch of his opponents, his overmatched opponents, in spectacular fashion. Whereas the Klitschko's, especially Wladimir, for the most part, it was quite boring and a bit too methodical. So again, I'm not dissing the Klitschko's as in terms of skills or anything like that. No, they were very skilled, very good fighters. But that era wasn't a classic era. There wasn't the level of competition needed, guys that were able to challenge them during the majority of their reigns. Whereas in this era right now, with the likes of Joshua, Parker, these are guys who let their hands go. These are guys who have seen get hurt. These are guys who have seen in brawls and, tough fights. And they're all in the mix together. You know, they're all punchers. They're all big guys. It's not like the Klitschko era where you've got a couple guys who are tall and then everybody else is short and they can't get close to these tall guys who have perfected the art of boxing long. No, this is an era where everybody's big. Joshua's big. Big and tall. Wilder's big and tall. Joseph Parker's a decent height. Huey Fury. Jarrell Miller's 6'4". 300 pounds. All these guys are big. So they're much closer in terms of their level, level and ability than it was in the Klitschko era. This is why I'm telling you, man, this is going to be a classic era. We're going to look back in years to come and say, you know what? That Joshua, like Fury, Parker era, however we're going to call it in years to come, we're going to look back on this era and we're going to say it was a great time for heavyweight boxing. I'm telling you now, this is going to happen. So anyway, drop me your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel about everything I talked about in this video. It's Hatman, I'm out.